Have you ever wondered what your birds really think about you when you're gone? Not for a few hours, not overnight, but for 5 entire days. Most bird owners assume their pets will simply eat, sleep, and wait. But research suggests something far more fascinating. Many bird species can form strong social bonds, recognize individual humans, and even experience stress when their routine suddenly changes. So I decided to find out for myself. Before leaving, I prepared everything carefully. Fresh food stations, multiple water sources, extra enrichment toys, cameras positioned around the room. Every precaution was taken. Physically, my birds would be safe, but emotionally, that was the mystery. Day 1 looked surprisingly normal. The birds followed their usual routines. They ate, preened, explored their environment, and interacted with each other. If they noticed I was gone, they didn't seem too concerned. But according to avian behavior experts, birds often rely heavily on routine, and significant behavioral changes may not appear immediately.
By day 2, subtle differences began to emerge. One bird spent more time near the area where I usually entered the room. Another became noticeably quieter than normal. These weren't dramatic changes, but they were enough to raise questions. Were they searching for me, or simply reacting to a disruption in their daily pattern? Day 3 revealed something even more interesting. The cameras captured longer periods of inactivity. Social interactions between the birds increased. Researchers studying parrots and other intelligent bird species have found that social animals often compensate for missing members of their group by strengthening interactions with those who remain. Watching the footage, it felt like I was seeing that behavior unfold in real time. By day 4, the room felt different. Not empty, just quieter. The birds continued eating normally and showed no signs of physical distress. But there was a noticeable reduction in playful activity. The toys that usually attracted constant attention were being ignored more often. For creatures that thrive on stimulation and companionship, my absence seemed to be having an effect. Then came day 5. As I reviewed the final hours of footage, one detail stood out. Several times throughout the day, the birds gathered near the same location where they would normally see me. It happened again and again. Not constantly, but enough to suggest expectation.
Scientists continue debating exactly how birds perceive human relationships, but studies consistently show that many species can recognize familiar faces, remember individual people, and build long-term social bonds. Watching my birds that day, it became impossible to dismiss those findings as abstract science. They felt real. What surprised me most wasn't whether my birds survived 5 days without me. Of course they did. What surprised me was discovering how much of their world revolves around connection. Food matters, safety matters, but companionship may matter far more than many of us realize. This experiment wasn't really about leaving birds alone. It was about understanding what happens when a relationship is temporarily removed from an animal's daily life. And the answer wasn't found in dramatic moments. It was hidden in small behaviors, quiet routines, and subtle signs that are easy to miss. The next time you see a bird perched silently in its cage or sitting quietly on a branch, remember this. Behind those tiny eyes may be a mind that notices far more than we think. Sometimes the strongest bonds are the ones we don't fully appreciate until they're tested. And after 5 days away, one thing became clear. I wasn't the only one counting the days until we saw each other again.
But the story didn't end when I walked through the door. In fact, that's when the most interesting part began. Over the next few hours, I paid close attention to every detail. The birds seemed determined to make up for lost time. They followed my movements more closely than usual. Whenever I left the room, even for a few minutes, several of them would immediately shift their attention toward the doorway. It was a behavior I had seen before, but never this consistently. Scientists who study animal cognition often talk about something called social attachment. In simple terms, it's the bond that develops between individuals who regularly interact and depend on one another. While many people associate this concept with dogs and cats, growing evidence suggests that birds are capable of forming surprisingly complex social relationships as well. One famous study found that certain parrots can remember human faces for years. Other research has shown that birds can distinguish between familiar and unfamiliar voices. These abilities make sense when you consider how social many bird species are in the wild. Survival often depends on recognizing family members, flockmates, and potential threats.
As I reviewed more footage from the 5-day experiment, I noticed patterns I had completely missed before. Every morning, shortly after sunrise, the birds became more active. This wasn't surprising. Birds naturally respond to changing light levels. But what caught my attention was where they chose to spend their time. On several occasions, they gathered near the same perch closest to my usual sitting area. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe it was routine. Or maybe that location had become associated with something important in their daily lives. The truth is that animal behavior is rarely simple. Scientists are careful about assigning human emotions to animals because doing so can sometimes lead to incorrect conclusions. Yet at the same time, modern research continues revealing that many animals experience emotional states far richer than we once believed. For decades, people underestimated birds. They were often described as creatures driven almost entirely by instinct. But that image has changed dramatically. Today, researchers have documented crows solving complex puzzles, parrots learning hundreds of words, and ravens planning for future events. Some bird species can even outperform young children in specific problem-solving tasks. The more we learn about birds, the more mysterious they become. Watching my own birds during those 5 days felt like observing a tiny society. There were leaders and followers. There were moments of cooperation and moments of disagreement. Some birds appeared confident and independent. Others preferred staying close to companions. Without realizing it, I had spent years seeing them as a group. This experiment forced me to see them as individuals. One bird adapted almost immediately to my absence. Another seemed noticeably more cautious. A third became surprisingly adventurous, exploring areas it rarely visited when I was home. It was as if removing one element from their environment had revealed hidden parts of their personalities. And that raises an interesting question. How much do we truly know about the animals that share our lives? Most of us interact with pets every day. We feed them, we clean up after them, we talk to them. But how often do we stop and observe them? Really observe them? Not for a few seconds, not while scrolling through our phones, but carefully, patiently, like a scientist studying a newly discovered species. Because when you do, ordinary behaviors suddenly become fascinating. A glance, a sound, a routine, a reaction. Each one tells a story. As night fell on my first day back home, the birds gradually settled into their familiar sleeping spots. The room looked exactly as it had before I left. Yet something had changed. Not in them,